and gelled into a deceptively casual mop. Instead of a hand-woven tunic and breeches, he was dressed in jeans and a black t-shirt that, no matter how good they looked on him, had to be terribly stifling. And he was wearing shoes. She'd hardly ever seen Tamani wearing shoes. But light or dark, she knew his eyes. Eyes that featured prominently in her dreams, as familiar to her as her own, or her parents', or David's. As soon as their eyes locked, the months since she'd last seen Tamani shrank from an eternity to an instant. Last winter, in a moment of anger, she'd told him to go away, and he had. She hadn't known where or for how long, or if she'd ever see him again. After nearly a year, she had almost gotten used to the ache she felt in her chest every time she thought about him. But suddenly, he was here, almost close enough to touch. Laurel looked up at David, but he wasn't looking at her. He, too, had noticed Tamani. "Wow," Chelsea said from behind Laurel's shoulder, breaking her reverie. "Who's the hot new guy?" Her boyfriend Ryan scoffed. "Well, he is. I'm not blind," Chelsea added matter-of-factly. Laurel still couldn't speak as Tamani's gaze flitted from her to David and back again. A million thoughts spun through her head. Why is he here? Why is he dressed like that? Why didn't he tell me he was coming? She hardly felt David pry her hands from his shirt, lacing his warm fingers through her own, which were suddenly cold as ice. "Foreign exchange, I bet," Ryan said. "Look at Mr. Robeson parading them all around." "Maybe," Chelsea said noncommittally. Mr. Robeson said something to the three students who were following him through the hallway, and Tamani's head swung so that even his profile was no longer visible. As if released from a spell, Laurel dropped her gaze to the floor. David squeezed her hand and she looked up at him. "Is that who I think it is?" Laurel nodded, unable to find her voice. Though David and Tamani had met only twice before, both events had been memorable. When David looked back toward Tamani, so did Laurel. The other boy in the group looked embarrassed, and the girl was explaining something to him in a language that was clearly not English. Mr. Robeson nodded approvingly. Ryan crossed his arms over his chest and grinned. "See? Told you. Foreign exchange." Tamani was shifting the weight of a black backpack from shoulder to shoulder, looking bored. Looking human. That by itself was almost as jarring as his being here in the first place. And then he was looking at her again, less openly now, his glance veiled beneath dark eyelashes. Laurel fought to breathe evenly. She didn't know what to think. Avalon wouldn't send him here without reason, and Laurel couldn't imagine Tamani abandoning his post. "You okay?" Chelsea asked, stepping up beside Laurel. "You look kind of freaked." Before she could stop herself, Laurel flicked her eyes in Tamani's direction, a move Chelsea tracked instantly. "It's Tamani," she said, hoping she didn't sound as relieved or terrified as she felt. She must have succeeded because Chelsea only stared in disbelief. "The hot one?" she whispered. Laurel nodded. "Seriously?" Chelsea squealed, only to be cut off by a sharp gesture from Laurel. Laurel glanced covertly over at Tamani to see if she'd been caught. The tick of a smile at one corner of his mouth told her she had. Then the foreign exchange students were following Mr. Robeson down the hallway, away from Laurel. Just before Tamani disappeared around the corner, he looked back at Laurel and winked. Not for the first time, she was supremely grateful she couldn't blush. She turned to David. He was staring down at her, his eyes full of questions. Laurel sighed and held her hands up in front of her. "I had nothing to do with this." "It's a good thing, right?" David said, after they'd managed to detangle themselves from Chelsea and Ryan and stood together in front of Laurel's first class. Laurel couldn't remember the last time the 1-minute warning bell had made her feel so